Welcome to It Happened in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we're going to be just so excited today because we're interviewing people that have either made history with Grand Prairie or they're making Grand Prairie historious in the future. And that is the case today, and we are so pleased to have with us today the CEO of the wonderful Visiting Nurse Association that's celebrating a diamond anniversary. And now everyone, girls always love diamonds, but when you have a diamond anniversary, that is very important to the ones that are experiencing this exciting adventure that they've never experienced before. We're so pleased. I'd like to tell you a little story about a longtime friend of ours that has been really important, a Dr. Robert Smith with this organization. And he's not on the show today, but he brought the big honcho of his organization, and we are so pleased to welcome a very special young man that is, I guess you would say, he's one of the stem winders that we know about for older people that used to wear the watch that you would wind it up and get the stem all just right and then let it run its absolute course. This is a young man that has done this. And Mr. Robert Carpenter is CEO. We are really delighted to welcome you, young man.
Ruthie, I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we're excited about what you do.
Well, it's a privilege to serve the community.
Yes, it is.
And anytime you serve the community, you always say that you get more out of it than you put into it, and that seems to be true with our organization,
Yes.
as well as what you do for the community.
Personally, how long have you been with this wonderful, wonderful organization?
11 years.
11 years.
Yes. In
Well.
our 75-year history, I'm only the 5th CEO.
Oh, that is good.
So-
In other words, they train them and keep them as long as they obey.
Right.
Oh, that is good. Well,
And hopefully don't burn them out.
that is wonderful. Well, in working, are you a resident of Dallas?
Yes,
Well,
I am personally.
That's good. That is acceptable because we always like to know who comes into Grand Prairie, Texas. Just in case you get in jail, we like to bring you cookies. We can't get you out of jail and all of that kind of good stuff. So we're very careful about the people that we invite to Grand Prairie, Texas.
I'll try and stay out of trouble.
You will. And it's been delightful that you have agreed to come and talk about this wonderful organization and they gave me a set of wonderful, wonderful things to ask, and I hope they told you what they were that I was going to ask you about, because it says, how did the Visiting Nurse Association come into existence? It didn't just happen, did it?
No, it didn't. There was a significant need in the Depression.
Yes.
Of mothers coming through the Metroplex area where they and their children were dying in the tents and in
Yes.
the rail yards.
Yes.
So a group of citizens and leadership in the community got together, got some volunteer nurses, also then started to actually pay for the volunteer nurses to go in and help these mothers and children that had such a high mortality rate in the Depression. So
Yes.
sometimes people are called the Volunteer Nurse Association.
Yes.
And that sort of morphed over time into the Visiting Nurse Association. There are 500 organizations like us around the nation, but we're all separate, we're all independent,
Yes.
and we're all governed by a local community board.
Well, during that time when there was a depression, how did they raise did you have any kind of fundraiser to be able to pay for some of these things for some of the patients that you had?
We did, and it mostly started out with teas.
Oh, it did?
Yes, we actually have, as you said, Dr. Smith has got some records that talk about the first tea where they collected $4.16.
And that was a lot then.
Back then it was.
Yes, it
and
was.
that paid for the medications and the dressings. And the nurses themselves were volunteers at that time.
Well, I like the tea. That's sort of British in a sense, but you all made it American, and it counted for us in that direction, didn't it?
It sure worked.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you all came into existence because since this is your 75th anniversary of that, I interviewed last month one of the ladies that has had your program at her church for 33 years here in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Right.
And that's a result that Grand Prairie had no idea the general public doesn't, that the fact that you all had something in Dallas, Texas that's been going for 75 years, you made it tried and true, and we've been a part of it, and we got an opportunity to really salute this lady because of the Meals on Wheels that
Right.
is part of your program. Next, I need to know, when the Visiting Nurse Association was organized, was it just nurses that went out into the community, or is it the ones that still were on the case?
We still do all the same things.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we still go out into the community, and that's where the visiting nurse actually got its name, is that instead of being confined to a hospital or a clinic or a ward, the nurses actually went out into the community, because a lot of people, especially seniors now, as it was back then, become homebound.
Yes, they do.
And if they're homebound, whether it's because they don't have transportation, maybe they've got physical impairments, maybe they've got family out of town, people are prisoners.
Yes, they
a lot
are.
of times.
Yeah.
And so the nurses, and now we have as many therapists as we do nurses, they go to the home instead of having to go to the emergency room or a clinic.
Well, I'm excited to know, when these nurses on their own would go around into homes, was there a charge for that, or did they do this as a service through your organization?
It was a service, and it was free.
Uh-huh.
It probably, for the first 40 years of our existence, most of the services were free.
These nurses were wonderful.
They really were. And then what happened is the community realized the benefit in terms of tax dollars, because it kept them out of the public clinics.
Yes, they
kept them
did.
out of the emergency rooms. So a lot of civic groups and wealthy individuals started funding the actual hiring of nurses. And so the nurses started to then get paid because we grew. And our big growth, of course, came with Medicare in the mid-'60s.
Yes.
When that came about, then we were able to actually earn our way to build up the organization, and then only have to rely on charitable dollars for charitable care.
Well, now this is exciting, because what happened to the tea parties? You didn't have to have them anymore, did you? Or did you still?
No, actually, I still attend a couple a year.
You do?
Yep.
Isn't that exciting?
It is, because what it means is that the people that put them on are saying to the community and their friends that this organization is worthwhile. We need to support the charitable care that it gives. And one of the ways that they can add value is to socialize and raise money just at a tea.
Yes, and besides that, it's a tradition that you want to keep alive, to keep that in your memory of how you started, and that you carried on, even if you do it only a few times a year.
Right.
That's good. And you might get more than $4 when you have one of these high-powered teas that we can promote these days, isn't it?
It is. Some of those donations are amazing.
Yes.
Because what happens is the people get together, realize that it's a shared value.
Yes.
Whether it's health, healing, comfort, that when you start to get people together of a common cause, it's amazing how it energizes each other. And if they can give, then somebody wants to do a little more, and they can give. So sometimes they're quite beneficial monetarily.
Yes, and it will just grow like Topsy, won't it?
We hope so.
Isn't that wonderful? That's great. The next thing I need down here, there was a need in 1934 for them to go in the community. We've talked about that during a economic hardship. And it says, where was the greatest need in caring for the rapidly growing elderly population? And we talked about that, didn't we?
Medicare, right?
Yes. And what happened when Medicare came on board? Was that kind of like a shot in the arm or a transfusion?
Yes. It was a tremendous boost, because what happens is, as the population is aging, that what happens is, we all know that people sometimes don't have acute issues.
Yes.
You know, some people have heart attacks, some people have strokes, some people have falls and breaks. But for seniors, the biggest problem is chronic, and that means it's continuous. It doesn't go away.
Yes.
And so if you've got diabetes, you've got congestive heart failure, you've got pulmonary disorders, you've got diabetes, you've got dementia, all of those things put together, that if one or two things that people are able to cope with, but then two of them hit at the same time, now you got a problem.
Yes, you do.
And that's where Medicare realized that if they can have people taken care of in the home and not have to go to the emergency room,
Right.
that it costs everybody a lot less money.
Yes, it does.
So that's what the home care is all about.
Yes. And do you find that the people that have the home care are happier than the ones that have to go to the other, even though they might get a different kind of treatment if they go to a hospital or a care center?
We do, Ruthie, and the number one reason is that when people go to a hospital, they get the best clinical care they can.
Yes.
But it's amazing how most people, the biggest factor they want is care.
Uh-huh.
And so in the home, people feel that there's more compassion.
Yes.
They feel there's more hands-on personal attention.
Yes.
They're in familiar surroundings. And there's been a lot of studies to show that people actually heal faster and they recover better at home than in an institutional setting.
Because they're familiar with that, and they love their home, and they love the environment, and they know that if there's any place that I want to pass on into another world, it would be
At home.
At home.
Right.
And a lot of people do really feel that way. And how have the volunteer needs of the visiting nurses changed since '34 that are important to your volunteers? Is there any change in the way you get nurses now than you did back then? Do you get volunteer nurses, or all of them paid for through the Medicare programs and otherwise?
We have actually, as of today, we have no volunteer nurses.
Oh, how good.
All of our nurses are paid and they're
Yes.
compensated.
Yeah.
Because to get nurses, there's a nursing shortage that everybody's suffering through. Hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices. So we have to pay for our nurses. Our volunteer need, though, is growing exponentially.
Yes.
And the reason for that is you talk to your friends and people nobody volunteers unless they feel they're adding value.
Yes.
Nobody volunteers unless they feel they're contributing something meaningful. Nobody volunteers unless they have available time, talent, or treasure. You put all that together, and volunteers are struggling right now because nobody's retiring early because of economics.
And they can't buy gasoline at $1.98.
Right? Because
Yes.
now it's double that.
Yes.
You can't, people that have had to go back to work.
Yes.
You've got young mothers who used to be a great volunteer group. In general, a lot of those now have to work.
Yes.
They have children in daycare and they have to pay for that. So what's happening is our volunteer component is really struggling to maintain the critical mass we need for our meals program, for our hospice program. And that's one that's really a difficult one
Yes.
because a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about
Yes.
dying.
Yes.
But one of the requirements that we have is 5% of all of our visits must be done by a volunteer who is willing to sit in the home with somebody who's dying,
Yes.
where maybe their son, their daughter, or their loved one, maybe that person needs to go to the doctor. Maybe
Yeah.
that person needs to go buy groceries. Well, who's going to stay with the loved one? That's where our volunteers come in, just to sit and to listen.
That's wonderful.
Because a lot of people that are dying want to be at home. They want to have some dignity in their last days.
Yes.
They don't want invasive treatments and aggressive things done to them.
Yes.
They'd rather be free of pain,
Yes.
have some dignity, and have somebody listen to their story.
Oh, that is wonderful.
And that's where volunteers come.
Yes. Well, you mentioned that you have several programs. You have the hospice program, the Meals on Wheels that we know about.
Right.
Are there any other classifications of your service that you give through this nursing association?
Well, home care is one.
Home care.
And that's the big reason for the name, really. And home care is where people today, when you go to the hospital, Ruthie, if you're not aware of this, do you know more people now come out of the hospital with a wound that they didn't have when they went in?
Or another disease?
Well, or an infection.
Yes, infection, yes.
Because people are coming out now with sutures, with staples,
Yes.
with ports in them for IV.
Yes.
They've had a joint replacement. Everybody now, until the day of the procedure, you're a source of revenue to a hospital. It's the way the system works. The day after your procedure, you're a cost.
Yes, you are.
So what happens is you get discharged. So now people need nurses for wound treatment, wound care. They need therapists for learning how to walk, sometimes how to talk, how to swallow.
Yeah.
And so all of that we provide in the home. And with Medicare, you don't pay anything.
Yes.
That's the beauty of that program, is if you're eligible for Medicare, we can go into the home and provide home care and hospice, and Medicare pays 100%. No copay, no deductible.
No deductible.
And that's why everybody that does what we do, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit, that's why everybody wants Medicare patients.
We just tell the President of the United States and all of his friends that we don't want them to mess with Medicare, but that's another story.
Right.
We don't want to get into that, do we? Now, I'd like for you to tell me of hospice, Meals on Wheels, home care, and all of the different programs that you have. What do you think is the most acceptable of all?
Acceptable?
Acceptable to all of the people in Dallas County.
Meals on Wheels.
Do you think that is the most?
Yeah, the reason for that is it's a relatively low cost.
Yes.
It provides a very basic human need.
Yes, it does.
It allows people to stay in their home where they want to be, and anybody who volunteers to deliver them, you don't have to speak to more than 2 or 3 people, and they'll tell you that the volunteer experience, they get more out of it, they feel, than what the recipient does, because they've demonstrated compassion, they've proven that they've met a need in the community, they've proven to their children and grandchildren that they're still a contributing member to society, and you've enabled somebody not to have to go to the hospital or emergency room because you've kept them hydrated and you've kept them nourished with just a very basic human need. And the problem that we have is, Ruthie, we're all getting older.
Yes.
And because we're getting older, there are a lot of people who they may look like, well, why are they getting a meal?
Yes.
Well, it's because maybe they can't walk, maybe they can't drive anymore,
Yes.
maybe they've had knee or hip replacement surgery so they can't stand to
Yeah.
cook.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many needs from people that are captured in their own home to get a meal. And a volunteer in Meals on Wheels does that. And Grand Prairie does a really good job in terms of recruiting volunteers and retaining volunteers through the different organizations and individuals, that you tend to take care of your own in terms of feeding them. And the big thing is, it avoids depression.
Yes, it does.
Because for a senior especially, who gets that visit, somebody knocks on the door and says, Meals on Wheels, they look forward to that visit and they look forward to the nutrition they get.
And don't you find that when the Meals on Wheels person, volunteer, goes to that home, they develop a bonding with someone like that they can serve and do this, and that person may be the only one that comes to that door other than the mailman.
Right.
And I think that is a wonderful tribute to your volunteers that take that on, and especially at their expense in driving their
Right.
own car, insured by themselves, and the gasoline paid for by themselves. And I think it's a wonderful happening. And I recently interviewed Peggy Ellard, who is one of the stem winders here in Grand Prairie, Texas, that has done a wonderful work for about 33 years. And that was a salute of one person in Grand Prairie, Texas, and I don't know how many that you have in Grand Prairie, Texas, but we're most appreciative of the Meals on Wheels, because I've had not only different people report to us about this, and that's the reason we wanted to go to the source where all of this happens, and that you're in a position to be able to help in so many ways. Just like Meals on Wheels, those meals aren't magic. Where do you get your meals?
Right.
There's somebody that has to prepare those. Tell me about your Meals on Wheels, how you get food to the different places.
Well, we are actually the largest Meals on Wheels provider in the country.
Are you really?
Yeah. There's a lot of other big cities that have larger programs,
Yeah.
but they have multiple providers.
Oh, they do.
We have a kitchen. It's where our building burned down about 4 years ago, and we rebuilt it with a state-of-the-art kitchen.
Yeah.
We put out about a little over 5,000 meals each day.
Yes.
We then take them from that site and we use what's called a hub and spoke approach. In other words, we take it from the central kitchen, truck it to drop sites around the community, and we have one in Grand Prairie.
Yeah.
And then the volunteers go to that site and deliver them to the local area. And Grand Prairie can be really proud of, you've got a successful program here, and take care of your own. We have a capacity to do more if we can get more volunteers.
I'm concerned about your kitchen, where you build all of these the food to go out. Everything is so immaculate. I've watched them bring the food up to our center on Church Street,
Right.
and everything looks so perfect. How on earth can you afford to do all of these things, or do you have it down to a fine science?
We do have it down pretty well, but
Yeah.
we couldn't do it without donations, and we couldn't do it without volunteers.
Do you get donations of food and things?
No, and
No.
the reason we
You-
don't is because
You don't want to take that kind.
right, because what happens is with seniors,
Yes.
you've got salt problems,
Yeah.
you've got potassium problems,
Yes.
you've got spice problems, and you have to have 6 weeks ahead of time with our program with the state. We
Yeah.
have to have our menus pre-approved.
Oh, you do?
Yes, so you cannot run the risk.
Is that the state health department?
Yes.
Mercy. I didn't know you got involved with the hierarchy.
Oh, very much so. We
Yes.
get inspected literally up the wazoo in terms
Yes.
of because
Yes.
of the volume of meals we do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so everything has to be pre-approved. It has to be a certain temperature. It has to be a certain timeline. And so God bless all these other organizations that get involved with delivering meals on a what we call an ad hoc basis, because at least people are being fed. But for people who have captured in terms of their own home, the Meals on Wheels program is the only way they can provide assurance through the state, because we get about 80% of our funding through the state. Then it's 20% of our funding is through volunteers and donors.
I'd like to ask this question. I know that you have the ones that you have now that you're taking care of. How do you get new clients that would just love to be a recipient of Meals on Wheels? Does it have to go through the sources you already have, or what kind of program do you have for that?
We do use the Area Agency on Aging. That's
Okay.
a Dallas County
All right.
program. And we
Okay.
also use the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services, because one of the things we must do to keep the integrity going, you got to make sure that people truly are eligible.
That's right.
So to avoid our cost of trying to vet or prove out that
Yeah.
they're eligible, we use the Area Agency on Aging and the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services. They send social workers out, and they will validate the worthiness of the people.
I see.
And we refer people to them from our volunteers, from any, you could call up and say, I've got a woman down the street that I know that I'm amazed she doesn't have it. She should. Then we'll refer them, and then those agencies will
They
send.
clear it.
They clear it.
Yes.
And that way we've got integrity behind the eligibility criteria
Yes.
of who gets the meals.
That is a wonderful process. And how long did that have to come into being? Was that since we had Medicare and had the state was over the programs, or was this in the
It's
past?
really in the last 3 or 4 years we've done it, because we used
Yeah.
to have some people that were outright charitable care
Yeah.
that we would put on service.
Uh-huh.
Then you get somebody to find out, well, wait a minute, they shouldn't be getting it. So then
Yeah.
you'd have to send somebody else out to double
Yes.
check and triple check. And then you'd send somebody out 3 months later. Well, that got to be too much cost
Uh-huh.
that was involved in administrative stuff
Yeah.
instead of feeding them.
Feed him. Mm-hmm.
So now we rely upon the state and the Area Agency on Aging to do that vetting for us. And that way we can put all of our money and time and talent into actually feeding.
That's authenticated the process
Right.
and smoothed it out considerably, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
That's wonderful. Well, at your place of business, do you have a huge staff, or do you just have a few staff other than Mr. Robert?
For the meals program, we only have 17 employees.
Oh, that is for all of Dallas County?
Yeah.
That is a
But that's
tremendous
because of
load, isn't it?
It's the technology of the kitchen,
Uh-huh.
the way that, as you said, that cooking is now a science. It's not an art anymore for what we
Yes,
do.
uh-huh.
And then
Is that generic food, so to speak?
it is really, because you have to, in order to make it for diabetics
For everyone?
and for everyone, you got to make it so it's not the greatest tasting, because I've eaten a few of them, but it is adequate, it's appropriate, and the main thing is it meets the nutritional requirements.
That is great. Now that's very important, and especially when you get past the age of 60 or 70ish, and they need every one of those little happiness things that happen
Right.
to them.
And one of the interesting things is hydration. I don't know if you're aware that a lot of hospital calls and emergency trips are because because of problems with incontinence and going to
Yes.
the bathroom. A lot of
Yes.
people don't drink, and they get dehydrated. Well, part of the meal for us is a carton of milk.
Oh, it
that,
is.
that makes sure that they get hydrated.
And that's, well, I know that it's such a blessing to so many people here in our city, and I was just thinking about the whole county. That is a majestic amount of territory that you have,
Yeah.
and what a revelation it is to find out a little bit more about it. Let's see if there's anything else here. What can the community do to support the Visiting Nurse Association Meals on Wheels program in Dallas County? Now, what more do you need other than more volunteers, or what?
Volunteers and donations, Ruthie. It really comes, and
comes-
also, if people are aware that there's a friend, a loved one, or a neighbor down the street who truly has a need and they're homebound,
Yeah.
I would like people to assume that responsibility to make referrals so that we can turn them into the area agency or the state and get them on the service.
And do we have a magic number or a magic address or something for them so that we
Right.
can?
We do. It's 214
Okay.
689 2210 for volunteering, and then the 2239 for referrals.
And that's the magic one that somebody might want to talk about, and that's referrals.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'd like for you to look out into your camera that says guest right here, and I'd like you to talk about the people in Grand Prairie that might be watching our show, and give them a thank you to the ones that are volunteers, and a pitch about anyone else that wants to be a volunteer, to give them these magic numbers and tell them to give us a call, and let's see what we can build in Grand Prairie, Texas. This is your
Okay.
chance to talk to Grand Prairie.
Well, Ruthie, I appreciate it. And what I'd like you to know is that we did some statistics and analysis. And in Grand Prairie, since we've had the program here for over 30 years, that the citizens of Grand Prairie have delivered over 250,000 meals to needy individuals that help keep them out of an institution. And so the community can be proud of that. But in order to continue that legacy and that history, we'd like to get more volunteers, who can call us at 214-689-2210. Or if you know somebody who really needs that care because they're homebound, please call us at 214-689-2239, and we'll see what we can do to get them some help.
You made an A+. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. You're a genuine CEO and not just somebody that just happened to be passing by on a cloud. Thank you for taking care
It's
of
a
many of
privilege.
us. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ruthie.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do, and that we document it as correctly as we can. And we think we brought you the good news today about the Visiting Nurses Association. And thanks to all of those that made it possible. And thank you for watching our show and the history of Grand Prairie, Texas.